Hello, everyone. Welcome to FiredUp, the podcast for marketers working in early and late stage startups. Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome to FiredUp. My name is Morgan McLintic, and today I'm joined by Chris Ulbrich.
Hello there.
And by our very own Shane Jordan.
Hey, everyone.
So today we are going to be talking about GEO, Generative Engine Optimization, but specifically as it applies to press releases. So many of you will remember the social media press release, which had completely reformatted press releases back in the day. Here we are, 2025. GEO is all the rage. We thought we would unpack the implications of what that means to one of the sort of mainstays of PR, the press release. And there are some changes, and they're important ones. So we wanted to run through some guidance on that. So we brought in Chris to sort of provide the PR aspect, and Shane, who many of you remember we had on a few weeks ago to talk all about GEO. So Shane, I'm going to start with you. Let's just remind people, when we say Generative Engine Optimization, what is that?
Yeah, great. So GEO refers to kind of website and page optimization that's being done to influence the output of what we see from generative AI models. So when we're looking at AI overviews, we're looking at ChatGPT perplexity responses. This is what we're optimizing for, those platforms. So generative engine optimization.
Perfect. So, increasingly, but your buyers are using AI search to do their research. We've got stats, 72% of B2B decision makers are using them. 90% click through to the ultimate destination to check the sources. And press releases could be very well one of those sources, right, Chris?
Well, that's right. The press releases sort of occupy an interesting kind of middle ground in a marketing strategy aimed at LLMs like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. The content in the release itself is potentially highly coveted by the LLM or likely to show up on certain searches in an LLM. But the medium by which you communicate a press release really matters even more than normal when it comes to GEO. Because press releases on wire services like Globe Newswire, Business Wire, and so on tend to be suppressed by the search engine. And because LLMs, when they're running their internet searches, the first thing they do is they check Bing or they check Google search and they collect data from the results of those searches. They might not necessarily see your press release there. That's why it's important. One of the principles of GEO is to make sure that your press release appears on different channels like LinkedIn or your blog, to make sure that the material that the LLM is actually likely to cite, if it sees it, shows up in its searches.
Right. So for a long time, I think the issuing a press release over a wire was seen as an SEO tactic. Obviously, you can control the messaging there. And the wire services themselves would promote that as a benefit of putting a press release over the wire. But Google quickly realized you're sort of gaming the system here to get sort of backlinks and push out the extra pages. So they suppressed them, as you said, Chris, and that's still the case. But AI crawlers work in a slightly different way. So Shane, just tell us a little bit about fundamentally, when it comes to GEO, what are the basic principles of GEO as an extension of SEO? How are they different?
Sure. So for SEO, we really focus a lot on how we can rank with traditional search results, right? Whereas for GEO, we're optimizing for the AI-powered engine results. For SEO, we're focusing on the keyword optimization, as you said, backlinks, to really try to improve those rankings. And where in GEO, we're really focusing more on authoritative information that can be referenced by the model. So SEO tends to support more of a long-term strategy, where GEO tends to offer more of a chance at top placement in AI-generated search results.
Right. And there's this principle of EAT, right, that's well known as Google promotes it, EEAT, experience, expertise, authority, and trust. And those are the sort of foundations of SEO. What do we mean, Shane, on the face of it, experience, expertise, authority, and trust all sound fairly similar, but they are different when it comes to SEO, and they do apply to any content you're putting out there. So maybe just unpack that for us.
Yeah, correct. Great point. When it comes to this EEAT, which has been foundational for SEO in order to try to ensure that you're getting the best ranking possible within your content. So experience, we're looking to demonstrate a page experience for the user. So is the page structured in a way that's easy to read? Are there types of rich media? Do we have graphics to help tell the story? Maybe video, things like that are giving signals to search engines that there is potentially a good experience on this page. When it comes to expertise, this is really focusing on, let's say, like the author's specific knowledge or skills related to the subject matter that, the topic is about. When we talk about authoritativeness, that's really talking about the author and as well the website's reputation as a reliable source of information. So are others linking to this, right? Other third parties linking to this content as an example of this particular topic. And then we get to trustworthiness, right? And that really focuses more on the accuracy, the reliability of the content in the website, making sure is the data correct, one of the things that we're saying correct. So that's how those become EEAT.
Wonderful. And so those principles apply to press releases anyway, right? You should, if you're SEOing or search optimizing a press release, you should have been doing that, bearing those in mind. But now we come to sort of this GEO world, Chris, and, hey, if I want to get my press release somehow into the responses of ChatGPT, which I do, what should I do? What's our recommendation there?
Well, right. The differences between a traditional press release and a GEO press release are subtle but important. The main thing that you will notice looking at a GEO optimized release is that even more than in a traditional press release, you're signposting the different sections of content. So you're saying, here's where we're talking about what matters. Here's where we're talking about what's new. So that the LLM is really clear how to chunk the information in the release. Also, bullet points are a part of a typical release. In a GEO optimized release, you will put bullet points typically underneath the headline to summarize the news. And what really experienced PR people will notice is that everything in a GEO release looks like a release you've probably seen somewhere sometime. I've seen releases that use, release formats that use bullet points after the headline. I've seen release formats that are heavily signposted. So a GEO optimized release is really combining a bunch of different tactics that PR people are familiar with, maybe if not necessarily all in the same place.
Right. But just to be clear then, one of the points you mentioned there was, I have my press release classic architecture with the headline, and then I might have a little subdeck. And then I would normally go into the date line and the strap line of the company, the date and the place and the description of the company. And I'm into the body of my press release. But what you're saying here is put bullets below that subdeck, headline, subdeck, bullets, then the date and the location. So get it right up above, even before you've announced, you've started the body copy. Is that correct?
That's the style we've adopted based on our understanding of best practices. The thing to understand about GEO and PR is that, sort of like in the early days of SEO, the best practices are evolving. What we're describing here is the state of the art as of July 2025. And it will change as LLM practices change. For instance, I was doing research recently which suggested that still ChatGPT averages Bing above all for its web searches, and that it makes that all the more important to understand how Bing is ranking the topics you care about. If you're thinking about GEO. That said, as I wrap up that research, I see someone on LinkedIn saying, a new study's come out that shows that ChatGPT is starting to rely on Google search more now. And that's not what my research showed. But this is a fast-moving field. Yes, at this moment, it seems that the consensus is that the bullets underneath the headline, as you described, Morgan, are a good way to sort of prime the LLM to understand what's in the doc and helps it make sense of the material in the press release, maybe more likely to use it, at least more able to properly subdivide the content. And so, yeah, that is one of the practices we've adopted.
And that works with the wire. Like the wire is fine with that kind of.
Right. Well, as far as I can tell, any wire service, and I'll just put a pin in what a wire service is for those not familiar, but any wire service is fine with that format. It's a style which I personally have seen for years and years on and off. Some agencies use it. So I would be surprised if any wire service would have a problem with that, with putting that into their CMS. It's always good to check with your wire service just to confirm that they can handle a particular format like that. But I know that ours can. And so, we're certainly using that with our clients. Just to circle back to what is a wire service, for those not familiar, when you classically hear about putting a release on the wire, back in the day, that meant something a little bit more elaborate than it does today. Right now, it means you're working with an online service, which will post your press release to their website along with video or photos or quotes that you've defined, and they'll give it a home that's very neatly formatted and search engine optimized. And on top of that, they will, in most cases, directly distribute that press release to reporters who have signed up for whatever distribution you've purchased from the wire. So you can purchase a national distribution that hits everyone in their database, and you can purchase a tech centers distribution, which hits regions that are like Durham and the Bay Area that are known for technology, and also hits particular tech organizations, publications that have signed up for it. In practice, for a long time, we've told clients that the main purpose of a wire is not so much to get your press release into the hands of a reporter, because a reporter who signs up for a press release feed is getting so many irrelevant press releases that most won't do it that way. Most of the time, it's the PR team that's sending the press release directly to reporters. But the wire is still useful as a place for the release to live long term. For many years, it was the way to generate news alerts that would prompt reporters following your company, following related topics, and or your competitors. If you want to stick a thumb in their eye, and let them know that you've beaten them to the punch, well, you put that news on the wire, and they're going to wake up in the morning and see that news, and their PR team's going to have a very bad day. Now, that whole practice is likely a casualty of the shift to GEO, because news alerts are not, at least at the moment, really a thing in the world of LLMs. You could imagine eventually they could be, but with LLMs set up the way they are, the more search shifts in that direction, you could argue the less important alerts are going to be.
That's right. And so it's triggering those alerts based on a bunch of keywords, right, Shane? From a GEO perspective, which is the area that you're focused on, you're working with the PR team. How should they think about inserting keywords or prompts into something like a press release?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when you think about the content that you want to surface in an LLM about your brand, think about how you want to work that into the press release, how you want to say that, how you want to answer that. Think about the questions, maybe the handful of questions that your target audiences might be wanting to know about your brand and how that separates them from competitors. And then aim to work that content in almost as a response so that the LLM could, as much as it can get away with, take it verbatim as a response to a question about the competitive set or your product set or solutions that are like your brand or your product, right? So that's one way to really try to engineer, right, a response that in LLMs that ties to your press release.
Right. And the boilerplate, which is the description of the company, is a key place to sort of put a lot of that information, because it's going to appear on every press release that you issue.
Yeah.
And, it's going to detect the sort of associations from there. Because Shane said FAQs there, right? FAQs are a big GEO play, right? You see them on core web pages now, about a product. Hey, where can I get this product? How's this product priced? What are the main things about this product? Because a lot of people are asking LLMs questions and you want your response to come up. Now, should I be adding an FAQ to the bottom of my press release?
Right. Well, you absolutely could, and it often makes sense to include a Q&A. And again, this is something that experienced PR people will probably have done at some point in their careers, to add a question and answer section covering details that haven't been addressed in the main copy. That's part of the overall tendency in a GEO release to structure information a little more formally than you typically do. Another great example of that is with quotes. So in a classic press release, the quotes from the CEO or the partner, the customer, they're layered into the copy organically following a likely place. So like if you're doing a funding release, the copy of the release touches on the momentum of the company. That's a good place for the venture capital quote to show up, praising the management team and the traction that the company's achieved so far. In a GEO release, you sort of sacrifice some of that flow for a more rigid and formal segmentation of content. So what's new, what's the news is in one place, why it matters is in another place, and then you'll have a separate section just dedicated to quotes. This is similar to the practice of what PR people call a quote sheet, where sometimes if you're doing a customer release or a partnership release and you have 8 different partners that all merit a quote, well, that's too much to layer into the main copy. So you create a whole separate section just to hold all the quotes. With a GEO press release, you're basically formalizing that practice and doing it in every release.
So an FAQ section, you're breaking out the quotes there, Chris. Just walk us through the different sort of features. How would I structure the information in this Geo press release?
Well, that's a good point. The theme of highly structuring the Geo release and signposting the content in it really extends all the way down to the individual sentences. Best practice right now is to try to, even more than normal, really be rigorous about expressing one idea per paragraph. If you think back to your days in high school composition, that was the whole point of a paragraph, right?
Yes.
But in practice, sometimes we get carried away with the amount of material that we're trying to get into one place, or sometimes because multiple parties are working on a press release, the theme of a particular paragraph might get muddled. People might pack 2 or 3 ideas into a single paragraph by the time everyone's had their input. It would always have been best practice to try to separate those ideas out into separate paragraphs. But with Geo, there's even more reason. And, tactically speaking, just from trying to get people to go along with changes, you actually have a good reason besides style to tell people we really need to break these ideas out into separate paragraphs. And, that we need to do it this way for the sake of better comprehension by LLMs taking a look at this document.
Right. And Shane, you can attach audio or you can attach images to a press release. You have to sometimes, if you're using a wire feed, you have to pay a bit more for that. But if I do that, this sort of multimodal, multi-format for press releases, is that going to help my GEO? What's the impact of having different content formats?
Yeah, sure. So anywhere you can have your content described or featured in different formats is certainly going to help inform the LLMs, because they're crawling the web and looking at all the same information that traditional search engines, they might be looking at it in a little bit of a different view, but at the same time, it's still kind of capturing all that information. So the more ways and different ways that you can describe your brand, your product, feature that in different ways, it's just more opportunities for the LLMs to pick up those signals and include those signals in their results.
Right. So it's not actually like scanning the actual content of the image, but it's reading the alt text there and the title of the image and saying, hey, this page, might be a press release, has got an image on here, it's got a table, and it's got some audio. That makes it a more authoritative page about this topic. I might want to include, I might want to weight this information more highly.
Correct. And if maybe your competitor is looking to put out a similar press release at the same time, doesn't have those elements, there's a good chance that you might be able to win that.
Okay. So there are changes to the format of the press release. Chris, you just mentioned, bullet points, 1 point per paragraph, front load the information at the top, include multiple different formats, make sure you've got your keywords and sort of prompts, FAQ type information in the press release as high up as possible. So slightly structured it in a different way. Let's talk a little bit about distribution. We've talked about wires, which, okay, not every press release is going to go over the wire. And maybe that doesn't make any difference, or that make much difference to the whether ChatGPT picks it up, which I actually do with my GEO press release once I've got it.
See, I think this is such an important question, and it gets at the unique nature of LLMs as opposed to search engines, because they are, in a way, when it comes to distribution, they're combining a web search with an analysis to figure out what they're going to present to whoever gave them the prompt. As we mentioned early on in this episode, search engines, unless they're specifically prompted, do not return results from newswires like Business Wire, PR Newswire, Globe Newswire, which is why we often tell clients that the main reason to put your release on the wire really isn't so much anymore SEO. It's for generating those news alerts, for having a home, and for certain publicly traded companies. This isn't really relevant to startups, but publicly traded companies have disclosure rules that a wire can satisfy. Because when the LLM goes out and does its search through, say, Bing or whatever search engine it uses, it's probably not going to turn up your press release. It might turn up all kinds of other information about your website, even, crucially, information that does not turn up in the first 10 results when you do the equivalent search on Bing. And the reason for that is that the LLM is using a method, an API, to search the search engine, and it looks a lot deeper. It'll get maybe 40 results back. It gets like multiple pages, and it's free to use whatever it thinks relevant for there. So it will sometimes surface information that you would never click through to see because it's buried several pages deep. But what's not going to show up in that search is your press release. So what's the point, you might say? Well, what is going to show up, especially on ChatGPT, often is your website and your LinkedIn. And personally, I don't know that I've seen this absolutely confirmed, but I don't think it's a coincidence that, both Bing and LinkedIn are associated with Microsoft, and both of them play such an important role in answering questions about companies. So what I've been advising clients is make sure that your press release shows up on your own website. For geo purposes, that's probably even more important than making sure it shows up on a wire, because it's more likely to be seen by the LLM when it performs the web searches that it does to answer questions. Secondarily, it is good to summarize your announcement on LinkedIn and then link from there to the wire or to your blog. Cogently hit the main points in your LinkedIn post and then link out for the details. If you do that, I think you are going to get a much better result in Geo than if you simply post to the wire and leave it be from there.
Right. Because social networks, LinkedIn, and notably Reddit, G2, are inputs into the LLMs. And so, Shane, this knocks on to to creating derivative content around your press release. Could be a social post, could be a blog post. Sort of knocks into this concept of like ranch style SEO, GEO. People will be familiar with like sort of an anchor page, an SEO pillar page, and that strategy from SEO. But when it comes to GEO, where you're sort of breaking things into smaller chunks, there's this new concept called ranch style SEO and GEO. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, correct. So traditionally, we've been working with what could be termed as almost a skyscraper model for our kind of longer pillar content, where previous to GEO, we really look to kind of pack as much information and expertise, authoritativeness into one specific piece of content, right? And kind of has all encompassing, right? And then we would, in a pillar cluster strategy, would cluster off of that piece of content to other derivative pieces, be it use cases, potentially blogs, things that explore, different areas of that subject potentially more deeply. Whereas now Think about that skyscraper broken up into a bunch of separate ranch houses that are all related in some respect, right? And so this is a new strategy, a new approach, right? Where we're taking these content that's been traditionally in these longer formats and putting it in smaller modular pieces, as you mentioned, so that LLMs have an easier opportunity to go in and grab that content, source that content, and feature that as a result, right? So it's a little bit more attuned to what LLMs are looking for, transitioning from more of a skyscraper to a more of a ranch style or ranch house model.
Right. And so with my announcement, the blog post, the social media posts, the video that we maybe have on YouTube about it, the piece that my CEO records as well, those all sort of ladder into a sort of a cluster or sort of a ranch around that theme. And so, the PR team, they've taken the keywords, they're in the boilerplate, we've put them throughout the press release to answer the questions, and then we are posting this on our website because we think that that's probably the place that the LLMs will pick it up most. And we're highlighting that as much we can with all this derivative content on the day, right? And that will combine the SEO and Geo best practices.
Correct. And what that allows is for the best opportunities for your brand and products to be discovered at any point along the traditional and AI search buyer journey.
Okay. And, as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking, well, what kind of prompts are people actually going to be typing in? And I guess they're going to be typing in, they're going to be tracking particular areas. But also when it comes down to that buyer decision, what are the latest features of this product? When was it released? How is it different from this other product, which is the newest one? Who has this feature? So I do think that there are going to be questions that are answered in a press release or that buyers are going to be asking, and also reporters, right? Reporters use Google to find sources. And now, of course, they're using AI. And so if you're going to be written about, they're going to be typing in, what's the latest news from this company, right?
That's right. And all the more reason then to make sure that that news appears in locations that pop up in web search. Like latest news, it does depend on the search engine. So if you ask for the latest news on Google about a company, I don't think, if I recall, you do not get press releases. If you ask for the latest announcements, you might get press releases. If you ask for the latest press releases, you will get press releases. But you'd rather not chance it, right? Because the beautiful thing about an LLM is that it is good at making semantic associations. It's good at understanding, looking beyond the literal text of a keyword to understand that this content over here is recognizably associated with what this person asked about. But the LLM doing the web search still needs to see the content. You have to be in the running. And that's why it's so important and why I stress so much that startups need to post their news in multiple places, not just the wire.
Yeah. And having a newsroom is important, and don't merge it with your blog. I mean, it's important for the LLMs to find the latest news and have a nice sort of schema markup. But there's a concept of crawl depth in SEO, Shane. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, like most AI search crawlers won't go below sort of 5 levels deep. So homepage and then resources, and then so don't bury it right down on a subdirectory. But I think it's important to have all these announcements in one place, which when you're building out, you're an early stage company, you might not have a dedicated newsroom because you haven't got a lot of news. But I do think it's important to sort of start that location so that the crawlers can find that information easily and understand this is an announcement. Okay, so just to summarize here, AI search is here. Your prospects are using it. So are reporters. You don't have to optimize your press releases for GEO, but it's relatively straightforward to do that. And the principles are you've always got to have a clear headline and subject, even more important now than ever before. Consider putting in some bullet points above that sort of dateline in there so that the key points are high up so that the crawlers can ingest it. Have a nice, clear structure, maybe even mark up, these are the quotes, maybe think about an FAQ section, make it sure it's really easily sort of scannable with good sort of snippet potential. You've spoken to your SEO team about their keywords and the prompts that they're going after. So you've updated your boilerplate with those and the content of this announcement. And maybe you've added in some different types of content formats. There's an image with clear title and alt text. There's a video. And then, yeah, sure, put it on a newswire, but also make sure you're publishing it clearly on your website. And then you have derivative assets, social media posts, blog posts, another video that you are pointing to, and you're distributing it to show good sort of signal to that news so that the search crawlers and AI crawlers can rank that highly and can see it, and then you're likely to appear. So this is a relatively straightforward thing for you to do. Not only is PR having a real moment when it comes to AI search because of all the media being ingested into this, but your own content, your press releases can easily be GEO enabled. And this is an emerging field and something that you can get some easy wins. We hope that was useful for you all. Shane, thanks for joining us again. Really enjoyed that. And Chris, thanks as ever for your time. And we will see you all again next week.